Good morning. Welcome back to another video with me, Mr. K. Today we're going to be going through rounding and estimating. So let's start off. Why do we need to round and estimate? Well, there's two main reasons that we need to round and estimate. The first being that it gives us less precise answers, which we sometimes need. And whenever I'm talking about that, think about like your own personal weight. You don't go off and say, I weigh 137.259678 pounds. No, you would be very precise and round that to the nearest pound that you have. You do not need to be that exact over things. So that is like the main reason why we need to round. And the other reason is because the world is not always in exact measurements. Um, what really resonates with me is money. Like uh, especially when you're doing conversions with other countries. Like a penny might not be worth 1 cent somewhere else. It might be worth like 0.008, but we can round that up to just 1 cent. So that's kind of why we round and estimate, is to help us get like relative ideas of how much something is worth. So with that being said, I'm actually going to go through some methods and try and make rounding and estimating a little easier for us. So the steps to just using my rounding K method, one is just pay attention to directions, because that will oftentimes tell you whether you're rounding to the nearest thousand, tenth, hundredth, 100, million, whatever the directions are. And then the other important rule is to remember five or more up the score, or four or less, let it rest. This rule is very important because that's really determining the exact way we're rounding. Because if the number you're looking at is five or more, it's going to increase in value, and then if the number is four or less, it's going to remain the same value. So let's go ahead and get started. So first, we need to notice the directions. It says round the following numbers to the nearest 10. Now, whenever I'm rounding, I'm going to make sure that I circle the place value it's telling us to round, and I'm going to underline the place value next to it. The other way to think about this is on a number line. If we're looking at nearest tens, we know that the number 45 is in between the nearest tens of 40 and 50. Well, when we're rounding, what we need to do is anything to the right of the circle is going to be zeroed out. But now I really need to look at this number and go, is five or more following the rule of five or more up the score, or is it four or less? Well, I know the number five is five or more, so that means this four over here is going to go up the score and add one more. So 4 plus 1, and that's going to give me 50. So 45 rounded to the nearest 10 is in fact 50. Let's go ahead and try a 3-digit number here. We're still rounding to the nearest 10, so we need to circle the number that is in the tens place and underline the number to the right of it. And now I need to ask myself, is the number next to the tens place five or more, or is it four or less? Well, I know the number 1 is four or less. So again, whatever I underline is going to become a 0. I know that this is resting because this number was 4 or less, so that means it's going to stay a 0. And the only other thing you need to know is anything to the left of the circle digit is going to remain the same. Because if I zeroed out the 1 right here, you would be saying that 101 rounded to the nearest 10 is closest to 0. If we think about that on a number line, no, the nearest tens are 100 and 110. So some more examples. This time we're rounding to the nearest 100. So again, ask myself, think about it on a number line. What are the nearest hundreds closest to this number? Starting with number 1, we have 45. So the nearest hundreds would be 0, and 100. Now let's find the rounding rule, but we don't have a place value to circle. So we're just going to say that it's a 0 and circle the 0. We're going to underline the 4. Now this is where it gets a little tricky, because anything before the underlined place value gets a 0. We follow our rule, 5 or more up the score or 4 or less. We see that 4 is in fact 4 or less, so it's a 0, and that means this is resting. So the nearest 100 would be 0. Let's look at 392. Circle again, underline. Anything before the underline gets zeroed out. Whatever we underline is always going to be a 0. Follow the rule, 5 or more, or is it 4 or less? We know that 9 is in fact 5 or more, so that means we're going to go up the score and add 1 more to make this 400. And over here we have a 4-digit number. So again, find the hundreds place, and we need to circle the hundreds place, underline the place value to the right of it, which is our tens. Anything before the underline gets zeroed out. Now we apply our rule. Looking at the 5, is 8 5 or more, or is it 4 or less? We know that 8 is bigger than 5, but it's still going to get zeroed out. But that means I have to add 1 more up here. So 5 plus 1 is 6. Don't forget your arrows, that helps keep everything straight. And anything to the left of the circled digit remains the same. So 1,582 rounds up to 1,600. Now we've got some decimals which are a little tricky. Well, we're going to go through them. So it says round to the nearest 10th. So I need to find my 10th place, which we know using our decimal rules. See, always the place value to the right of the decimal. So circle it. Can't forget to put our decimal point in. Underline. So is 21 hundredths being rounded to the nearest 10th. Remember, we always zero out what we underline. We still apply the rule. Is 1 4 or less, or is it 5 or more? Well, we know that the number 1 is in fact falling in the category of 4 or less. So that means this number is resting, so it's going to stay 2, and add your 0 out in front. So it would round to 20 hundredths, or with decimals, you could actually get rid of the 0 and it would be 2 tenths. Let's look at this number. Again, circle the 10th place, go next door. Anything before is going to be zeroed out. What we underline is zeroed out. Follow our rules, going to the place value to the right of the tenths. We have 9. Is 9 5 or more, or is it 4 or less? We know that it is in fact 5 or more, so we are going to add 1 more, making this into an 8. Don't forget to bring down your decimal. Anything to the left just gets brought right on down. So we know that this would round to 3 and 800 thousandths. But again, with decimals, I could just cross these out. It'd be 3 and 8 tenths because those are equivalent. Next, we're going to talk about estimation a little bit. And the reason we do them together is because you need to round in order to estimate. And as long as you have rounding down, estimation's very easy. So again, just think about estimation as rounding and then completing an operation. And whenever I'm talking about the operations, I'm talking about multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. Following that, just pay attention to the directions or the largest place value present. You got to think a little more with it. Well, we see the largest place value present here are the tens place, so we need to round both of these numbers to the nearest tens. So again, circle and underline. Follow our rules. Is 9 5 or more, or is it 4 or less? it's 5 or more, so it's going to become a 0, meaning I have to add one more over here. It's going to make this into a 5, so I have 50. Don't forget to bring down your operational sign. So in this case, it's addition, so I got to bring down my plus sign. Go over here, circle my place value, underline the one next door. I got a little ahead of myself with the arrows, but that's okay. I need to look at the underlined place value. Is it 5 or more, or is it 4 or less? 8 is 5 or more, so that means we're going up the score again. Underline is going to be zeroed out. This is going to become 2. So I have 50 plus 20, so my best estimate sum would be 70. Over here, I see that the largest place value present is the hundreds, so I'm going to actually round this to the nearest hundred. I could go to the tens place here, but I want us to really focus on the largest place value present. So we are rounding to the nearest hundreds. Circle my hundreds, underline. Anything before that gets zeroed out. I need to look at this. Is 1 4 or less, or is it 5 or more? We know that 1 is less than 4, so that means my hundreds place is going to rest, so it's remaining the same. So that would round to the number 100. Need to bring down my operational sign, so I'm bringing down my subtraction sign. Need to go over here. I love putting my arrows ahead. I don't know why. Now we see right here we don't have a hundreds place, but that's no problem because I can put a 0. If I'm always struggling to, just remember to think about it on a number line. Is 97, is the nearest 100 to that going to be 0, or is it going to be 100? The number line can really help you with this. So again, circle my number in the hundreds place, underline the one next to it. I see that I follow my rule of 5 or more or 4 or less. 9 is 5 or more. So we know I'm going to need to add one more up here. So I have 1, 0 it out. So I can see that my difference is going to be 0. And we will actually be practicing multiplication and division sometimes in the future, but the operations still apply with those. But that pretty much covers it for today, and I will see you next time. Bye.